welcome to the stage Chris and Jordan from Vizcom.
Yo!
How are you? And you've been present throughout the day at different sessions. How have you found the day?
Very cool. I mean, I think the overall theme and tone of the talks have been great, and they all kind of rhyme with each other in some way or not. So yeah, it's been really cool.
Yeah,
amazing.
Something that's come up is like the jump to 3D, and it's like a really interesting. It's come up in a few talks, and like I think that's something we talk about a lot as Vizcom as well, like getting into 3D and what that means.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to hear from you guys, and it's been a huge journey for you guys over the last couple of years, and I'm just going to pass it over to you guys to present your work, and then I'll come back on at the end of your session for a bit of Q&A. So enjoy.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Sweet. So we'll get started here. Looks like we got some people I know in the chat here. Andrew Hay, we got Andrew Williams. Okay, awesome. Cool, guys. Sweet. It feels like I'm like in a Twitch stream. So, all right. So we're going to get started here. So the kind of title, I guess, here, the theme is understanding your style. We're going to go into kind of first an intro about Vizcom, kind of how we think about the future and our tools. And then Chris is going to go into more of the theme of understanding your style. Oh, Daniela, hello. You're here as well. So yeah, my name is Jordan, one of the co-founders of Vizcom, CEO. Chris, if you want to introduce yourself real fast as well.
Yeah, kind of had a background in industrial design, but now working on the kind of product design side of Vizcom. So it's been exciting so far.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, if we go to the next slide here. So yeah, we're going to start off with just a quick overview, kind of thinking about how we think about the tools and things. So starting off kind of with the question of, what do these things actually have in common? We have the iPhone all the way to the Coca-Cola bottle to Dieter Rams radio. And if we go to the next slide here, the thing they all actually have in common is they all started out as a sketch. And that's something that a lot of people actually don't realize, but a lot of things around us, they start out as drawings and some of the most iconic things. So if we go to the next slide, similar to what I was just saying, all the way down to the New York subway to the iconic Eames chair, these things were things that started out as drawings first before they became the physical object. And we really try to own this here at Vizcom, is kind of really understanding that drawing is something that's very fundamental to just humans in general. And if we go to the next slide, sketching is something that's it's very innately human, and it's something we've always used and something we've always done to kind of tell stories, communicate ideas, all the way down to just like, abstract things like you see here in the caveman times to some of the crazy Disney movies you see today. And, although that stayed the same, it's kind of stayed the test of time, honestly, if you think about drawing. The only thing that's really changed over time is essentially the canvas in which we do it. And one thing that we're trying to think about here at Vizcom is, okay, what is that next canvas? Where is the next medium, or I guess platform in which drawing can kind of find its leverage and stay its new, its next relevancy, I would say, in the modern way of design. So that's what we're always exploring here at Vizcom, the canvas that's always changing. So next slide here. So yeah, as you guys probably have all known by now, that AI really enables kind of this infinity creation process, right? Where you almost kind of run into this decision paralysis because you're getting so many ideas. But that's one of the superpowers. You're able to get essentially an unlimited amount of ideas of a single concept in just a matter of seconds. But in the next slide here, the one thing that's actually lacking with that is the actual signature, the artist's signature, having that sense of authorship that you normally would get if you were to create things by hand from the beginning. And this is something we're trying to figure out at Vizcom. Is like, you maybe go on Instagram these days, LinkedIn, you see all these generated images, but you don't really get a good sense of who created them, or I would say the unique style behind each image. That's really gotten lost, I would say, in the digital age. So going to the next slide here, this is kind of where we found ourselves in this really unique position where we're kind of really focused on, instead of kind of building this platform that thinks collectively and trying to essentially, train on everyone's work to kind of come up with this homogeneous model that everyone then derives similar results, we're trying to explore and understand how can we actually create these more so unique private experiences for each artist and designer so that they can keep their unique style that got them to where they are today, and more so use AI as kind of this this tool to just amplify their already existing voice. So that's kind of how we think about the problem in comparison to other tools. And a lot of this and all of it essentially is kind of in the spirit of accelerating the process of visionary minds. Like all of you guys in the chat here, these are the people, you guys are the kind of people that we're really building this tool for. And it's a big difference between acceleration and automation, right? So going to the next slide here, as you guys probably already know, this whole paper to production process, this is usually a multi-year process in different contexts, and it's relatively lengthy. But we're always asking ourselves at Vizcom, how do we actually more so accelerate that process rather than replace it? Similar to what I was saying before, there's a really big difference between automation and acceleration, right? Automation is you're trying to essentially get rid of something and replacing it with something new, but we're really focused on more so just accelerating the pre-existing process. And the first step in kind of doing that is, sketching is, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so this is kind of the first way of how we're thinking about doing that, which is, how do we go from sketch to 3D model in the most cohesive way, but also being very conscious of how artists and designers already work today. And a lot of that is just starting off with a sketch, right? A lot of things you do in Vizcom really leverage your ability to draw and communicate in that way. So this is just like a little preview of what that looks like at a high level, as far as like, we have the sketch that we rendered in Vizcom which then we generated 3D from. Just a quick illustration of that. And then, yeah, these are just different companies that we've kind of been working with really closely to kind of really understand what are those workflows and kind of how can we tailor this process in these different verticals. So yeah, that's kind of how we've been doing that. So I'm going to play this video really fast. Chris is going to play it, and it's kind of a quick video, a little sneak peek into the future. This is out now, but this is kind of how we're thinking about the future in our tool today. So I'll let Chris play that real quick. You should hear the audio.
A sketch is where every product begins, whether it's small or monumental. But a sketch isn't something you can hold. You can't sit on it, play with it, or fall in love with it. Not yet. It takes a human to nurture that sketch, to shape it, to breathe life into it, from concept to creation. Then they take it into 3D, revealing what cannot be captured in 2 dimensions, to make that idea real. This is who we build for, the dreamers, the visionaries, the makers, so they can explore more and test ideas. So you can make it real.
Awesome. Yeah, and that video was essentially a testament to the product where we were trying to essentially take a sketch, make it a 3D object, and we actually created a physical chair from that drawing that we 3D printed on a massive 3D printer. So shout out to the guys over at Hattie to making that possible. So yeah, that's kind of just a quick preview of what Vizcom is from a visual standpoint. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris now. He's going to kind of go into the personal owning your style part of this entire presentation. So yeah, Chris, feel free to take it away from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. So yeah, I want to talk about palettes and really how can we enable you to generate, in a style that's curated by you. So within Vizcom, you have access to a variety of different render styles, which we call palettes. You have our kind of general models, which are pretty much good at rendering any sort of image or any sort of sketch. And then you have our kind of more stylistic models that allow you to achieve a particular kind of color profile or kind of a toon-like style, as well as our industry-specific palettes, which are our automotive interior and exterior, which are kind of better for rendering a particular type of product, being vehicle designs. But we realize we're always expanding our offerings for different palettes, but we realize that no one really understands your style better than you. So we're creating palettes to enable you to kind of curate your own style and then create with it within Vizcom. And we can kind of think of palettes in a similar way to how we use mood boards in our design process. So you have to take you have to kind of sort through a lot of different images and kind of being very conscious about how you're curating them images that all share a particular theme or style. And then that kind of inspires you to sketch and to derive new ideas from that. So again, palettes can be thought of in a similar way, in which you have to curate a particular data set in order to then create with it. And it enables you to kind of explore and generate all these new ideas. So this is an example of if Dyson were to create a palette based on their kind of brand DNA. And you can see some of the generations there on the left that have come from that, of this kind of Dyson lamp, Dyson kettle. And then you can see at the bottom there, this kind of shoe that has been rendered in this Dyson style. And this is just kind of how we think about it, of really kind of organizing your data, sorting through it and arranging it in a way that can enable you to create and generate these new things. So again, kind of how it works is, it requires that kind of curation process, and then kind of use in Workbench within Vizcom, you're able to process the images. And then, wherever you are in Vizcom, you're able to choose your palette as a render style and then render your sketch. And this is just kind of a sample of kind of different generations we've been able to create over the past month. And I've been able to achieve this very consistent style that almost kind of feels like a collection of objects, that share this kind of similar visual fidelity. And this is kind of, again, another look at how this looks within Vizcom, of being able to curate this kind of data set, kind of linking a prompt to your sketch, and then being able to explore and prompt and come up with all these different new ideas. So kind of the types of palettes that we have found to be really successful so far are palettes that are trained on a personal style. So that could be your sketch style or how you render things using marker. A particular brand style, so a brand language or kind of like a brand's DNA, and also like kind of getting down into like specific product categories and like product lines to kind of organize that. And then you have like palettes that are trained on a particular visual style. So that could be like a shaded 3D style, or again, like just a certain visual fidelity. But this is kind of what those look like. So we have this example on the left here of some sketches and renders kind of from Scott Robertson, the brand language kind of being a Lego and what that could look like, as well as a visual style being this kind of shaded 3D style. And it's important to remember that these are just for you, just for you and your workspace and your team. This isn't being used by anyone else on Vizcom. This is just, we want to kind of create this tool that really just empowers you to create, again, in your style. And this is, again, just not accessible by anyone else. So I want to kind of jump into some of the workflows that we found to be really successful so far with palettes and kind of using these kind of custom models in your workflow. So one is kind of training a set kind of based on this like clean, refined line sketches, and being able to kind of like clean up some of your sketches. So kind of this like hairy kind of gestural sketch in the middle, and being able to output things that with a consistent line weight. It still needs a little bit of cleaning up, but it gets you there much quicker and much faster. This is the example from Scott Robertson of this kind of shaded sketch style. And then, you're able to input this kind of line drawing and then see this really immediately visualized with the shading and kind of these kind of environments added to them. So again, I think just the ability to shift fidelity so quickly, I think is what makes palettes really special and can save you a lot of time when trying to render things. As well as this kind of realistic render shaded style from Scott Robertson, kind of being able to apply your materials onto kind of this base, this base input. This is where it gets really interesting of kind of being able to curate a data set that is a little bit more kind of form driven. So again, this like sculptural 3D style that can be applied to your sketch to kind of get these gooey kind of 3D outputs for what this shoe could look like. And then being able to kind of take some of the inspiration from the sole there, or just kind of being able to explore again with your palette. And this is another kind of form exploration, but done with kind of images generated initially in Midjourney of this kind of marble sculptures, and then again being able to explore your kind of shoe here with all these just various kind of lines and very dynamic kind of sculptural feel to it. And being able to kind of like layer on top of this if you wanted to make this a little bit more realistic of a shoe. But again, palettes work really well for this like early exploration and being able to just kind of curating, again, that fidelity that you're trying to achieve. And this is kind of the final workflow for palettes, is being able to capture a brand language. I was even like really surprised by this one. It's so interesting how you're able to curate this like very small set of images of 4 to 9 images, and being able to input then your sketch of this like home, and seeing like how the Lego team might explore in this way of being able like visualizing what a kit might look like, and being able to just use prompting to kind of determine what's the colors of things and such. If by prompting red door or even snow in one of these, like you're able to like visualize what this kind of this scene could look like in different seasons, which is just wild to think about. But yeah, really being able to kind of capture that brand DNA and applying that to a particular sketch. It's really cool. All right, so we'd actually like to invite all of you guys to participate in our palettes beta process. We've been running it right now, and I guess I don't know if I can share a link.
Oh yeah, can we like chat in the? I don't know if we can talk in the chat with you guys. We should be able to.
But anyways, yeah, we'll be able to share
okay.
a link with you guys to access kind of the Google form to sign up for palettes. And we'd be happy to enable that and share over some educational materials to kind of get started with that as well. Yeah, we've been really surprised to see what people have been able to create with it so far. And yeah, excited to see kind of where you go with it.
Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. So now I'd like to kind of just talk through some of the different workflows that, of where kind of Vizcom can fit into your kind of design process. And kind of ranging from this kind of exploratory phase to creating visuals and such that are much more refined in your process. So it's kind of starting with image mix. And this is a really interesting one that we actually just launched this past week. You're kind of able to prompt visually in this way of being able to kind of combine multiple images together and adjust the weights in order to generate all these sorts of variations, and being able to combine concepts in this really unique way. So yeah, that is kind of accessible in the Workbench view within Vizcom.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, also kind of like the kind of bread and butter of Vizcom is being able to really visualize your sketch and being able to translate your line drawing into something much more realistic. And with our kind of latest Vizcom General 2, we're able to do that in a much higher fidelity than ever possible before. And it also really like understands your line drawings a lot better. So you can kind of have a hairier, more, again, gestural sketch, and it's able to interpret that and turn that into, again, a realistic image. And something to kind of on the opposite of this is sometimes you don't always want that, highest fidelity image. And so we've introduced a setting to control how much, like how far rendered it is. So whether it's by default, it's at 100%, but if you decrease that, you're able to get an image that is kind of a less rendered version of that to enable you to explore in a bit more better way, kind of build up your sketch over time.
Yep.
Awesome. And thank you, Dan, for sharing that link.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. Cool stuff.
Cool. The kind of next kind of workflow is really interesting is being able to, view, generate 3D and view that in augmented reality. So from Vizcom, you're able to export 3D geometry as a USDZ or GLB, to either use in something like Gravity Sketch or being able to view it on your iPad or iPhone. This is just super interesting to see your design at scale and really quickly kind of just like validate again proportions and other things, just to understand, understand how this feels in space. Being able to see your sketch kind of in this like mixed reality sense is really cool.
Yeah.
Being able to hold your idea as a prototype in 3D print. This is an exercise we did a few months ago, but being able to kind of explore in this way of kind of, again, just using sketching to then generate 3D geometry is really impressive. And we've just also announced a recent increase in the resolution of the 3D. So you'll be getting much higher resolution kind of geometry from Vizcom. And being able to, again, just like prototype and just like see, again, being able to hold your ideas is such a powerful thing. And yeah, this is just such an interesting exploration that was able to explore all these different chairs in a very short period of time because they were just sketches, right? Versus having to like sit down and 3D model all of these, and would have taken, you know, hours. Where this, or I guess it, yeah, it would have taken a lot longer, I guess, just that traditional process.
And one thing I just wanted to add here real fast is like another way to kind of think of a lot of the things that Chris is talking about here is just these are just different ways to essentially fail faster, right? Like you're now being able to make these decisions maybe on day 1, 2 of the process rather than 2 weeks down to kind of get that validation of if it's something you even want. Now you can truly, a sketch is as valuable as 3D was before all of this. So it's just really interesting to kind of think of it that way sometimes. It's like, okay, now that I can see my idea at this level of fidelity so early in the process, like how am I going to approach this differently? Maybe, I don't know, which is interesting.
Yeah. And like little details like, you know, how is this leg gonna, like the back leg gonna resolve into the form? Or again, like being able to like send that over to a vendor, like, hey, is this possible? Can we mold this? Like having that, you know, again, discussion at week 2 versus, you know, month 2 can make a huge difference in your process and kind of where that guides your development. So yeah, being able to see that at such, again, high fidelity very fast is can enable you to, you know, make those decisions. And this is another kind of example of being able to prototype using that mix node that we showed before. You know, apparently, if you add a vase, shoe, and 2 chairs, you get this kind of vase handles. We kind of joke with the team that this is like how they're going to teach math in the future, is like, you know, for designers. But it's interesting to be able to kind of again mix in this way to kind of and have this kind of 3D print that's, you know, possible, you know, in just an hour. And this is another one of being able to see your design in context. So I'll kind of slow this down here, but kind of taking that initial line drawing and again, cleaning it up and being able to render that individually within, you know, Vizcom, and then kind of turning that into a 3D model for then you can bring into kind of a environment. So again, similar to like what you do with like a key shot or something along those lines of you'd have your design and you'd get a angle that you'd like at a particular you know, from a particular view, then being able to bring that into Photoshop and add your context. But you're able to do that kind of all within Vizcom. So I'm able to create that 3D model, and then I kind of rough out, you know, this kind of countertop, able to render that as a scene, and then able to place in my 3D there for my pendants, and able to kind of refine that and generate this final visual. But again, really adding context to items really quickly can be super helpful as well within Vizcom. And then this is kind of the last workflow I'd like to talk through is material transfer. Our AI team has been very hard at work on this one, and it's been really impressive what you can do with this. Of being able to take, you know, a swatch or a color or image reference and being able to apply that to your design. So this is an example of applying this kind of monstera leaf to the sole of the shoe here, and then kind of taking this kind of knit material and applying that to the upper, then being able to apply this kind of blue color to kind of the tab, the pull tabs there. But again, really interesting how you can use kind of your materials and your, you know, your material library in order to inform Vizcom and, you know, apply them to the image. As well as this example always amazes me. So again, that vase, and being able to take a swatch of ceramic and being able to very quickly, you know, again, visualize that on, you know, this image. Is really, really interesting. And again, it's the same situation of, you know, like, oh, how will this kind of feel glazed? And like, or like in the future, or like a few weeks down the road, like you don't have to wait. Like you can just kind of like being able to make a decision so quickly of the direction for color, you know, can again now take minutes instead of, you know, weeks or months. And the same thing with like upholstery and other, you know, fabrics. You can apply by kind of selecting your area in Vizcom, applying your swatch. You're able to go ahead and do that. So yeah, it's really really interesting to kind of think of all these different ways that, you know, Vizcom can be applied, you know, as you're kind of working through and visualizing your design and trying to kind of increase that fidelity. How, you know, Vizcom can play a role in making that happen. But I'm going to hand it back over to Jordan to kind of cover what's next and kind of where we're going with Vizcom.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, no, that was great. Yeah, so I'm going to go into more so, I guess, from just thoughts, how we're like thinking about the future. So yeah, let's go to the next slide here really quick. So yeah, I would say these are kind of the different pillars and how we're really thinking about the future of Vizcom is like, how do we make it more intelligent, responsive, personal, natural? We've kind of touched on some of these today, but we're just kind of figuring out how do we double down in those areas and just really excel. So one way, to think about the intelligent piece of this is a lot of people have described Vizcom, and I could maybe agree previously and kind of a little bit today that it really fits in more so this intern bucket. You can kind of think of it. Nothing wrong with interns. I love interns, but it's just that's where it currently is. But there's a big difference between like an intern and a colleague, right? And a colleague is maybe a little bit more adaptive. They're maybe more collaborative. They're giving you ideas, and it's something you have maybe a little bit more trust in, I would say. So that kind of philosophical transformation is what we're aiming for right now. It's like, okay, how do we actually make Vizcom something that's more so a collaborator rather than something you're constantly having to fix and tell what to do? So that's kind of how we're thinking about the intelligent piece. And then another thing is kind of responsive, right? Prompting inherently really isn't something that artists and designers are main. Sad that I'm an intern. No, nothing against interns. It was like that was like a weird analogy that I came up with. I love you guys. So yeah, how do we make these things more responsive, right? Like these are kind of like different ways we're thinking of how to make Vizcom more of this interactive experience where you're visually communicating your intentions rather than trying to constantly verbally do it. It's really hard to just describe your intentions purely with words, which is why drawings is such a huge part. But what's the next step of that? How do you kind of, get a point across without being so literal with words? So we're always thinking of ways to do that as well. That's kind of the responsive piece. And another one, of course, is personal. Palettes is just kind of the first step into that. But what are some other aspects that are unique about you that you can somehow maybe transfer in some of your design decisions or some of your design proposals? These are different ways of us trying to tackle this personal pillar, is really trying to think of, okay, sure, everyone has their own unique style and things like that, but are there other things like, this maybe not make sense, but like, say, for example, everyone has their own unique playlist. People buy Spotify playlists, which are very fascinating to me. But that's kind of like another sense of like, okay, how do I bring my own personality into my design language? And these are things that we're constantly exploring internally as well. So yeah. And another piece of this is kind of the familiarity aspect, right? We're all very familiar with this particular workflow when it comes from going from paper to production. So we're always trying to be very conscious and understanding that we're not really trying to, let's say, reinvent the wheel, right? We're kind of trying to work within this familiar framework that a lot of designers are already, aware of, such as, going from sketch to render, 3D, then repeating that process, right? So working within that framework is kind of the bread and butter that we're trying to establish here, and we're constantly thinking about that. So yeah, that's a kind of how we're tackling that pillar there. And oh, cool. So that's pretty much the last slide here, guys. And thank you all for coming and hearing me and Chris talk about all this stuff. This is super fun. I love doing this every year, and I hope it was relatively insightful. I think we're going to go to a Q&A right after this. But yeah, I know it's been a long day for some of you guys. I really appreciate you coming out. But here's our emails as well. Take a screenshot. Feel free to reach out to me, Chris. I read every single email. I love talking to you guys. And yeah, it'd be great. So that's pretty much it. Well, I'll answer some of these questions. So we got Eric Swartz. Will we be able to import dedicated color palettes and have those colors render on a specific area and objects? Eric, you're reading our minds. It's like you're the one putting our roadmap together. Yes, these are like direct things we're thinking of. It's like, imagine you have a hex code, right? And you want that hex code to be applied to the rendering. These are things we're like quite literally developing right now in real time. So you can very much be expecting that. Yeah, impressive work, guys. It's super interesting. Thank you so much. Greetings from Munich. Munich in the house. Let's go. We had some people that were just out there in Frankfurt, actually. But yeah, super cool. Patrick Thornton, awesome. All right.
Guys, can I jump in and I'll try and pick up a lot of the community questions coming up in the chat. I've started a few of them. But I first wanted to say thank you so much. We love having you guys as part of Around. I think you guys have a shared mission in speeding up the process of getting an idea out of your mind and into reality. as we do, and so we really share that ambition and love having you a part of things. Just a quick question. This one's from me actually, and then I'll bounce into the community questions as well. Love the new palettes, really interesting, and this element of owning your style. And it would seem that creative direction is becoming increasingly important. And I wanted to, like, it kind of begs the question, well, what informs creative direction, which is, you know, on one side experience, but also better data, better insights. And when you imagine a world where brands are creating palettes for themselves on their style, what do you feel like it might mean for brands understanding their consumer at much more depth than we previously have had it ever?
It's really interesting. I think with palettes, you're able to kind of explore in all these different ways. It's like being able to kind of, maybe it's like a more direct, like from, again, your inspiration, or being able, like the shoe marble sculpture, like if like that's, if you know your target audience or something is like interested in like that more style, I guess you can like directly apply that and see that. Will that make a great product? You know, who knows? That's really for you, right, as a decision maker and designer to determine. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is kind of, you know, just to kind of think a little bit blue skies here, what we are showing is more so just the visual translation of a DNA, right? These are all just visual things. But a product is more than just that. I would think, you know, moving down the line, you're basically seeing V0 palettes. What this means, like 2 years from now, what's V5? Maybe companies are taking in other information that's not purely aesthetically oriented, right? Like things that are a little bit more abstractive slash quantitative or calculative, I guess you could say. But what you're seeing now is definitely more of the artistic expression of palettes, like design language, design DNA. But I do imagine a future where companies are going to, like at scale, right? Like right now we're just saying, hey, 30 images, that's it. But what if we're like, hey, show us your catalogs along with the sales numbers, along with, let's say, the demographics. And there's just other elements to help inspire those palettes. I'm not sure if that's actually going to be a thing, but that's kind of how we're thinking about it in generally. It's at a high level. So that could be really cool. Not sure what that means for the future, but could be awesome.
Yeah, very cool. And just staying on this topic of personalizing, Maine had that question, how personal is Vizcom compared to some of the other AI tools?
Totally. So I guess one way I would think about it is, so the first kind of obvious thing is just like this idea that, one, security and privacy is huge for us, right? So your work's not being shared. It's not like being trained, and next thing you know, somebody can query kind of what you created. That's like one element of it, right? But another thing I would say is just, I really think palettes is kind of like the main North Star when it comes to making this personal, because you're creating something that's not as repeatable, or as like, I guess someone else could technically do it, but it's not. It's very personal to you because it's your own style that you spent years developing. The reason that Scott Robertson's palette is so successful is because he spent the last 30 years learning how to draw and actually develop that personal style. So and we're just leveraging that. So I would say I wouldn't really depend. I would almost rephrase the question where it's like Vizcom isn't the thing itself that's making it personal. It's still you. It's very much still you, the artist or designer. And Vizcom is more so just the amplifier of your already existing personal style. So that's kind of how I think about it. And that's just different from something like a Midjourney where everyone's using the same pencil you could think of and getting essentially the same results to a degree.
And then maybe just to clarify, picking up a question from Victor, and I think you somewhat answered it with one of the other answers there, but he's asking, will there maybe be a footwear palette, and maybe I'll extend onto this, an apparel palette, industrial design palette, or is that generally not the way that you're, as you said, maybe artistic palette is maybe the expression that you used a moment ago. Is that the way that you're headed, or are you thinking of it in other ways?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, like as designing the feature, it was interesting to think of like before exactly we knew what it would produce. We were trying to have at least like preconception of like how will it be created, but we really just had to test it out and play around with it for ourselves. And we found that actually smaller kind of data sets really work really well. So typically, we're like in the existing version of palettes, having kind of again smaller, more curated data sets enable you to create with a very consistent visual and fidelity. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I want to stay on this topic. There's clearly a lot of questions around the idea of palettes. Dorian's asking, how do palettes differ from teaching and AI, a particular style? Is there a difference there in what we're talking about here?
I would say not really. I guess it depends what you mean by that. I guess you're teaching it a style. That's like one way, like a style can mean many things, right? Like a visual style, a brand DNA is also like a form of a style. So it's essentially the same, I guess, high level concept. Just how you go about it is slightly different, and the actual application is different. So now it's one thing to teach an AI your style, but then what do you do with that? How are you actually enabling the creative to then work with that style in ways that they normally wouldn't have because of the limitation of the tool itself? So now you're able to kind of use your style, like, okay, I wonder what it would look like on this 3D model. Oh, I wonder now that I've got this 3D model, that how would it look like if I 3D printed it? So it's like your style and your DNA is showing inklings all the way through the process from A to Z. There's just like, there's no more this loss of translation that happens sometimes from a mood board to production, where it's like you may have a particular DNA you're trying to get across, but it usually gets lost in like the process. Palettes is just like one way to constantly verify and kind of keep that coherence when you're doing that. So Chris, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but it's kind of how I would kind of think of the question a little bit.
I think that's solid.
And this one relates into how you're positioning your product. I mean, we ran a poll earlier on in the day on how people were using AI, which part of the process they were using AI. 65% of creatives using AI for initial ideation. I just remember a slide that you shared for, I think it was idea to refine. Just does that validate how you see things and see things going forward, how you expect people to be using Vizcom?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to use it, and at the core, it's able to take your sketch and see that at a higher fidelity. And again, it's like it's up to you what you decide to do next, right? You can then or use that as an underlay and keep sketching over that, or you can 3D print that, bring it into AR. A lot of different pathways, and it really just depends on what you're creating with it. But we just want to be able to enable our customers to explore in any of those ways and explore in any of those directions.
Yeah. Now in the future, there could be a way where it's like, as we go down the pipeline of just what products usually go through, it's like, there could be a world, I do see this, where a drawing to, like, you upload a drawing and then maybe like the mill machine goes off, and that's like truly kind of like, that's the new IGES file, like quite literally the paper, like that's the new STM. That could be super cool. I do see that being possible. How long that will take, I always surprise myself with these timelines, so I'm not even gonna like put that out there. But yeah, that's kind of how I also see the future as well.
Jordan, I remember last year at Around, I think you said like one day we'll be able to, but as soon as you like render something, a 3D printer will start going off, and it's like
yeah, Like now we're kind of there, exactly.
So kind of thinking a lot more about again, how do you refine and how do you keep again that intention behind your design as you continue through that process, even though it's augmented with AI.
Yes.
And just maybe speaking to what you perhaps alluded to with STL files there, Jordan. I mean, we've seen a lot of workflows today. We've seen Gustav, Paddy, Pike, Brian sharing workflows from Gravity Sketch or VR related applications or 3D related applications, and that exploring that interaction between those types of softwares and then AI. How do you see that relationship playing out going forward?
I think
interesting. Yeah, go for it, Chris.
I think you're always going to need a base, right? Something like whether that's a sketch, on paper, a sketch you digitally, a sketch in Gravity Sketch, whatever that may be, some sort of expression of your thought, right? And if you're able to export that from Gravity Sketch, amazing, and seen some really impressive results from 3D models to renders in Vizcom. But again, whatever you can do to create that like base and your expression of the idea, I think is going to be the really important part.
Yeah, and then I've just seen this comment now actually, just from Michael that perhaps reinforces that. He's been, I'll just read it out, dropping Gravity Sketch snapshots of projects from landing pad directly into Vizcom for test views whilst listening to this discussion, amazed at how far this tool has come. This will be extremely helpful for design references and quick iterations for options, textures, lighting, etc. Wow. So he's really excited by that opportunity, it would seem.
Very cool.
I wanted to also, I said at the start, we've got the fantastic guys at Nike tuning into this session, which is really great. So I want to talk a little bit into the footwear angle, if that's okay. Who from the footwear side, perhaps one of your community members, one of your users, is there anybody that stands out that says, these guys are using our tool really, really well? Like, these are great examples of how we use it.
For sure.
Really
For sure. Shout out to Dennis Mueller over at On Running. This guy's great. I mean, like, even before he was there, when he was at Bosch, he was just someone that really kind of like understood where Vizcom excelled, where it didn't. Like, he just kind of understood, like, oh yeah, this is how it fits into my workflow. Here's why it's unique. He really knew how to kind of like inject his own personal, I would say, like flair into it. So yeah, that's Dennis Mueller. That's one person I would say in the footwear space, particularly, that's kind of caught my eye. And we have a new episode of Design Decoded coming out where we flew out to Switzerland to kind of film some of his process and things like that. But that's someone in particular I would kind of like check out his Instagram or his website as well, and how he's kind of able to essentially use his camera lens, go out in nature, bring out these like essentially like fungi, flowers, and using Vizcom as a way to kind of like inject that into his designs, which is super unique. And that's just something that would have taken either you creating a custom node texture before, or it would have just been really hard to kind of explore that area. So that's someone that I've seen do a really clever job of even surprising me. It's like, oh, I didn't even know we could do that. That's cool.
Another thing with Dennis is like starting at different fidelities. And I know I talked about that with like being able to translate, go from sketch to render super quick, but also not just starting with a sketch, being able to start with like more abstract things. Like I think some of his processes, like, working in like watercolor, and then you're able to like get to a sketch or get to, a render super quickly from that. So again, it doesn't matter really what that input is. And it kind of allows you to be a lot more creative and kind of expressive with that initial input, because you can, if you need for your work, you need to present, at a certain fidelity, you can do that, right? You can get there. But again, just the expressive nature that I think Dennis has shown in a lot of his footwear stuff is really, really interesting, and how he's been able to translate fidelity super quickly with Vizcom.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, I mean, I think due to time, I think we are going to need to close this one out.
Yeah.
Although that there's loads of comments, please take the time to filter through them. And there's lots of questions in there too. I hope we got to most of them. Guys, really appreciate you guys being here, sharing what you're doing, the amazing work that you're doing, the progress that you guys are making. So thank you so much for joining us and for rounding off our around day one.